Continuing now on America's Forum, rejoined by Representative Marsha Blackburn and Tevi Troy, former Assistant Secretary at Health and Human Services. Thanks to both of you for staying with us here on America's Forum. Word out now that the first patient, if you will, Thomas Eric Duncan, has received an experimental Ebola drug in Texas. Tevi, why the wait, and why do you think they decided to give him that drug right now?
Well, I think the wait may be because A, it is experimental, and B, we don't have a lot of supplies. So they were monitoring his condition. As we saw, his condition did worsen. I think he went from serious to critical, and they figured that was the best thing to do. There's no known cure for Ebola, but there is treatment. You hydrate people, and you obviously keep them isolated, and that can work in some circumstances. Obviously, it wasn't working in this case, and I think they needed to take that next step and make a riskier treatment.
One other public health treatment question. I understand we're in the 8 to 10 day period for those who were quarantined and came into contact with Mr. Duncan. Tevi, have you heard anything about the real numbers of people that they are observing closely there in Texas?
I heard that there were something like 10 people they were monitoring closely, and then another 40 people they were looking at, and then another 100 people might have had contact. So this stuff spreads. The potential vectors spread pretty quickly. I'm not saying the disease spreads quickly, but the number of people you may have had contact in, just think about the number of people you come into contact with in a day, JD. So there's a lot of people you can be interacting with in a day, and so the reach you have can be far-ranging.
And just think about the number of people a congressman running for re-election comes into contact with during the campaign. Marsha, you're going through that right now, but you're also keeping a close eye on questions about waste disposal. The processes used for the Ebola patient in that apartment in Texas. You're on the Commerce Committee in the House. Are you folks going to take a look at interstate waste disposal in terms of public health in the wake of what's going on now in Texas?
Absolutely, we are. And we're going to have a hearing on the 16th of October. That will be in D.C., and we'll be hearing from the CDC. And JD, part of the problem is how do you not only handle the waste, but how do you handle the blood samples? And this is something that I discussed with the CDC. Of course, they have the BSL, the Biosafety Level Lab, 1, 2, 3, 4. And Ebola would be tested in a BSL-4 lab, the highest protections that are there for workers and for the samples. And my concern was that you would have that patient's blood and the samples, the fluid samples being tested in a lab in the hospital in Dallas, and then there would be contamination of equipment, or there would not be appropriate transfer of those.
And so you guys are prepared to look into that. Again, the date on that hearing, Marsha?
It's going to be October 16th.
Fair enough. I'm sorry, Marsha. Time is running short, and I want to get your reactions to a couple of other stories. First,
sure.
To Tevi again. The NBC freelance cameraman who contracted Ebola in West Africa, he's back on American soil in Nebraska. Do you know anything about his condition right now, Tevi?
No, I just know that NBC was very concerned about him. They brought him back via private plane, and they're also isolating the people on the team to make sure that they don't spread the disease if in fact they are infected. But I don't know the medical details of his condition at this point.
And to you both, Marsha, we'll begin with you. The specter of bioterrorism in this. Are you concerned about Ebola becoming a bioterror weapon? 20 seconds to answer that, please, ma'am.
Of course, you're always concerned about this, and it's why it's so important that we have the right type labs and technicians and the right protections around us.
Tevi, you and I have talked about this before. Is the risk greater now or lesser now with all the public awareness of Ebola?
Well, as you know, I'm always worried about bioweapons. I don't think that I'm necessarily worried about Ebola itself being weaponized, but there are all kinds of possible pathogens that people who wish to do us harm can weaponize, and hope it doesn't happen.
And on that somewhat sobering note, we thank you both for your time. Tevi Troy, Skyping in from Washington, and my congressional colleague in days past, Congressman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, taking time out from her time with constituents back home in the volunteer state to visit with us this morning. Thanks to you both.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now, you heard what Marsha and Tevi had to say. What is your take Why don't you tweet me your comments at NewsmaxTV, hashtag America's Forum, or visit us at facebook.com/Newsmax. We're coming right back.